right, got a quick video for the grade 9s here today. A couple notes I want to go over rather than making you read through your textbook a whole bunch. What is the difference between organic and inorganic compounds is our first question to deal with. And the difference there is, in one word, carbon. Organic compounds contain carbon. Inorganic compounds generally do not. So organic has carbon. Inorganic is one of two things. The easy one is no carbon, or only carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or carbonates. That's what our inorganic compounds are. Now, got to be careful, right? You'll go to the grocery store and you might see, oh, this is certified organic. That has to do with the way that it's grown in terms of the types of chemicals that are allowed and not allowed on it. But in terms of the chemistry definition, it's whether or not it contains carbon. There's more fancy definition that we could use, but organic compounds contain carbon. Inorganic is either no carbon or something like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, or a carbonate. So for example, and this is more of a Science 10 thing, but an example of a carbonate would be something like baking soda, NaHCO3, sodium hydrogen carbonate, or Na2CO3, which would be sodium carbonate. All right, so that's a little bit of a chemistry background there. Now, pause that, make sure you get some notes down in your booklet. Moving on then to macronutrients. I'm not going to really do a whole bunch with this, but these are nutrients required in large amounts, so underline that if you can. Micronutrients. These are nutrients required in very small amounts, as the name might suggest. In general, what are nutrients? Well, they are elements and compounds that are necessary for survival. Optimum amounts. Now, there's a bit you could read on page 198. And this is true for all nutrients. We have to absorb them in optimum amounts in order for them to be effective. In practice, this means not too much, not too little. Think of Goldilocks. Not too warm, not too hot, just right. And what that actually means is different for each nutrient. Some you need quite a bit before it gets to be too much. For others, I've heard people use the term vital poison, meaning something that you need a little bit of, but if it's too much, or even like a spoon kind of amount, it's deadly. So something like phosphorus, or actually even more so arsenic. Tiny amounts of arsenic are required by some living things. For most living things, just about any arsenic is deadly. Copper is another one. You need a little bit, but too much is actually poisonous. All right. We've got six macronutrients here that we want to look at. And what we've got going on with these, we're going to fill in this little chart. And this little chart tells you kind of what each of these is used for. I do expect that you will know these things. So first of all, with nitrogen, what is it used for in plants? Well, proteins. And that was terrible. Let's try again. Proteins and chlorophyll. One day I'm going to learn how to spell it. It's going to be great. Chlorophyll. There we go. And this is also responsible for leaf and stem growth. All right. Animals and humans. You're going to notice some similarities. Proteins. Also, growth and repair. You will also find nitrogen in nucleic acids, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit. But the big thing that we're going to find proteins in humans would be, or sorry, nitrogen in humans is going to be proteins. Okay, phosphorus. In plants, this is going to be root and flower growth. Additionally, we have it's used for cellular respiration. And photosynthesis. All right, in humans and animals, this is one of the major elements that makes up teeth, bones, and DNA. It's used in lots of different metabolic reactions, and that's both in plants and in animals and humans, as in the form of ATP. So I'm going to give you this ATP. We're going to talk more about that later, but it does use phosphorus. Potassium. Lots with potassium in plants, but I'm going to summarize it as early growth. Secondly, starch and sugar production. And we're going to leave it there. Also, helps with disease resistance, helps with chlorophyll production, tuber formation. In humans and animals, this is going to be for muscle contraction. So you might notice that if you get cramps, if you've been doing a lot of physical activity, you may be short on potassium, and someone can say, eat a banana, it'll help with cramps, and it often does. Muscle contraction as well as nerve impulses. Right, this takes us on to magnesium. Magnesium is super important for chlorophyll structure. Chlorophyll structure, that's the part that absorbs the sun in plants. It's also what makes them green. If you didn't have enough magnesium, your plant would tend to not be as green as it should. Because it's useful for chlorophyll structure, it's also super useful and needed for photosynthesis. Because if you don't have chlorophyll, you don't have photosynthesis. In humans and animals, again, structure of teeth and bones. Also used in humans and animals to help us absorb calcium and potassium. Calcium itself in plants, used for cell walls. Also important for cell division. So think back to mitosis especially. When we talk about humans and animals, bones and teeth, we need calcium. Calcium also super useful for blood clotting. If you don't have calcium, your blood doesn't clot properly and you bleed a lot from a tiny cut. And finally, we need it for our muscles and nerves as well. They work best. Essentially, muscles and nerves. Finally, sulfur. This is used in plants for fruit and grain production. proteins in animals, we use it for protein synthesis, so making proteins. That's where sulfur gets used. Also, enzyme activation, detoxification, it's part of your hair. If you were a bird, it's part of your feathers. If you're an animal, it's part of your fur, and that's why if any of those things burn, it smells horrible. All right, so make sure you pause that, get all of these things down if you haven't already. And then we move on. I think that's it on this page. So we've got to look at a few different types of organic molecules. First one is carbohydrates. Carbon is C. H is hydrogen. O is oxygen. What kind of foods contain carbohydrates? And here you could come up with lots, but things like pasta, potatoes, bread, sugar, and you can go on any of those kinds of things. Actually, during photosynthesis, glucose is the sugar that is eventually made by plants. Chemical structure, this is kind of what it looks like right here. This ring of carbons with one oxygen and then all kinds of other stuff branching off of it. Lipids, these are fats, oils, waxes. So again, where do we get this really from? Fats or oils in terms of plants or animals. They are made by both plants and animals. Again, they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You just saw that. Please write them down. Again, this is the name of, or this is a type of triglyceride or a fatty acid. And there we go. All right. Proteins are, and oh, sorry. We should go back and look at this here, though this is important. In that they are containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You can see lots of these long chains of carbons and hydrogens, and this makes these a fat, or a lipid anyways. All right, proteins and amino acids, getting close to the end here. Proteins are actually built from amino acids. So amino acids, if you want to call them, there's 20 different ones that get used in living things. And these amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. What kind of foods contain proteins? Well, meat, legumes like beans, things like tofu, everybody's favorite right there, eggs, all of those have protein in them. And yeah, amino acids, so in your body, they get built into muscles. They get built into all kinds of parts of your cells. But they are also the main component of enzymes, which if you remember that from last unit, enzymes are going to be your biological catalysts, okay, where they speed up or control the body's chemical reactions. So insulin controls blood sugar. You have diabetes, your body doesn't produce enough or doesn't produce any insulin. Trypsin is an enzyme that digests protein in the stomach. They contain chons, carbon, C, hydrogen, H, oxygen, you already have those ones. And this is a new one, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur, that's the S. Right. Nucleic acid. These are a organic molecule that's found in the human body, and animal bodies, and plant bodies. And they are, the two main ones are RNA and DNA. You should remember DNA from the first unit, deoxyribonucleic acid. RNA is ribonucleic acid. Will I ask you to spell those? I will not. However, these contain CHONP. So we've got chons, and now we have CHONP. And again, C is carbon, H is hydrogen, write them down please. O is oxygen, N is nitrogen, P, this is a new one, this is unique. to nucleic acids is phosphorus. All right. Important thing with these here, if you want to tell the difference between proteins and amino acids, you're looking for either phosphorus or sulfur. Right? When we take in substances, plants will take stuff in. I mean, we can eat stuff, but plants, they don't generally have mouths unless they are a Venus flytrap. They are, with diffusion, we have molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. It occurs without additional energy needed. An example would be fertilizer in the soil. So we put fertilizer into the soil, and it's going to diffuse into the roots. We have high concentration in the soil, low concentration in the roots. Fertilizer moves from high to low. So moves from high concentration in the soil to low concentration in the roots. Osmosis is a special type of diffusion. Brings water and or nutrients from high concentration in soil to low concentration in the plant roots. So again, it's going to bring, this is special kind of diffusion, just moving water from where there's lots to where there's less. So again, I water my plant, the same idea here, it moves from where there's lots in the soil to where there's less in the plant. Okay, there's my example. Active transport. This is a little bit weird. It requires energy. So remember when we talked about phosphorus being used for ATP? Well, plants and animals will use ATP to move stuff when there's lots of nutrient in the plant and they still want to get more in, they need to use active transport to move nutrients from low concentration to high concentration. All right, you can write down that example. You could also look on page 205 and you will see an example there. All right, animals. In terms of taking in substances, they're going to ingest by chewing and eating and so on. And then they're going to digest things using enzymes, to break the food down. Major process here is known as hydrolysis, which is going to be breaking down using water. Water, lysis, splitting, water splitting. Hydrolysis also uses enzymes. Ooh, there's those proteins again, and amino acids to build them. Following digestion, the amino acids, the glucose, the lipids, the RNA and DNA are absorbed from the intestines, carried throughout the body via the blood to where they end up being needed. So with plants, it's diffusion, osmosis, active transport. With animals, it's both ingestion and then digestion to get the nutrients that they need. And in different environments, organisms manage to get nutrients from a variety of sources in a variety of ways. Quick definition of substrate is the substance, and this is typically for plants or other like fungus, things like that don't normally move, that an organism lives on, like physically lives on. And that takes us to where we need to be. So finish up with these notes, and then there will be some assignments available to you on formative.com. Thanks.